Welcome to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist, brought to you by One Pitch. The guests on our show include some of the most notable journalists from the top US-based publications who cover topics including technology, lifestyle and culture, health, science, consumer products, business news, and now sports. We discuss their role, the types of stories they cover, what their inbox looks like, and how they connect with sources. Joining us today is Kendall Baker, a sports editor for Axios. Kendall writes the daily Axios Sports newsletter, and he covers the stats and stories driving the conversation. He's also the former founder of Sports Internet, which was acquired by Axios in 2019. During the episode, Kendall shares about his love of playing and following sports, some of the ways he compiles the sports newsletter at Axios, why he appreciates personal notes from sources, and more. Let's dive into the episode now.
Welcome, everyone. This is Coffee with the Journalist. I'm Beck Bamberger, founder of One Pitch, also of BAM, our agency that works with all the venture-backed crazy startups that exist in the world, which is super exciting. And live from DC, we just talked about it because I just came back from there as well. Kendall Baker on from Axios. We are excited to have you here, Kendall, and I cannot wait to talk about DC and sports and everything. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Now, Kendall, this is a little odd for us. We don't usually have a sports person of any sort on here. So how'd you get into the sports?
Yeah, well, I'm honored. I've been, a sports fan and athlete my whole life. I grew up playing as a kid, kind of every sport under the sun. In high school, I only because I had to narrowed that down to basketball, soccer, and lacrosse. I ended up playing lacrosse in college. And then out of school, I started out in sports media at Bleacher Report briefly, and then moved over to ESPN. And when I was at ESPN, I kind of had this kind of epiphany. It's weird because it's exactly what I ended up doing, but I just thought there should be a sports newsletter, weirdly enough. And that kind of set me on a journey to actually get out of sports media, but stay in media and just kind of figure out how to start a company, and kind of what I did. But I've basically been in sports media or just media since graduating.
Excellent. We like to talk about inboxes and how absurd they can get busy. But you're an editor, so sometimes that is a little bit different with what's going on in terms of pitches. So how's your inbox? What's it look like?
Oof, my inbox. So I've always been super as organized as you kind of be as somebody who sends a newsletter from his email, therefore every reply. I have a ton of email coming in every day, and it's kind of over the years gotten harder and harder to manage just because I'm getting, hundreds of replies from readers, obviously getting a ton of pitches. So it's definitely become increasingly challenging. Kind of over time, I've had to adapt to that volume and kind of develop new ways to keep my system somewhat organized. But I do my best to keep things in what I would call slots. So like a reply from a reader is obviously much different than, somebody pitching me, which is obviously also much different than a coworker emailing me. So I have filters as I can have in there to kind of keep things organized visually for me to knock out.
Oh, okay. So filters. I mean, people have very basic filters on this show, like a flag. That's about it. Do you have some sophisticated filtering system?
Somewhat.
Okay, tell us.
Well, so for instance, this is just kind of very specific to what I do, but I mentioned reader replies. The way I'm able to get those to all come into one place is basically a custom filter that has the subject line is RE:\Axios Sports, which is the name of my newsletter. So any email that's coming in that is someone replying to my newsletter is filtered. So that's kind of how I do that. And then the other ones are pretty simple. If it's from an Axios.com email, it gets filtered into the team. And then I have your kind of automated filters to kind of hopefully filter out important versus not important. So we've got a bunch of things working, and it's not perfect, but it kind of gets what I need my attention on up to the top of my feed, which is great.
I have to say, it's quite sophisticated. Out of all the inboxes I've heard on here, my goodness.
Yeah, well, it's necessary when, your whole life essentially is email. You got to have some organization. Otherwise, especially, it's as the newsletter continues to grow, it becomes harder and harder. But I've always been very committed to replying to my readers because I think it's just such a great experience on their end to, respond to a newsletter, and then the author of the newsletter gets back to you. And, every time people are like, oh my gosh, like, thanks for replying so fast. So I really try and make that a priority. And if I didn't have this, those would kind of get lost and I wouldn't be able to maintain those relationships. And that's important to me.
Oh, now so you're one of the first people who's ever mentioned responding to readers and actually getting an influx of readers who want to engage with you in some way, shape, or form. Because usually it's kind of a buried thing from a publicist, like, oh, loved your last article. Hey, do you want to cover my client? Like, it's like that type of compliment in some way, shape, or form, which is not. So what's a percentage, would you say, of like reader engagement versus pitches versus all the other things happening?
I'd say, pitches continue to grow. It's getting there, but I'd say, I still get more reader replies each day than pitches. But
really? That's amazing.
Yeah, I get probably, 50 to 100 a day.
Wow. Of readers.
Yeah.
Man, you're popular. Kendall.
Well, listen, we have about 500,000 subscribers, and it's sports, which is very casual and one of those things where people have very strong opinions. And what I kind of love about it is it's a great kind of space for debate, because in many ways, what you're debating doesn't really matter. There's plenty of things in sports that do, but when you're debating, well, you said this is the third best player in the NBA, and I actually think it's this guy. It's just kind of fun banter, and I think it gives people a license to. I'll get paragraphs upon paragraphs of people just clearly just needed to get this out, and this is now an outlet for them to get it out. And all of a sudden, the person who writes the newsletter they read responds right back to them with like great points. Like, it's just a cool experience for them, and it's a cool experience for me too to hear from readers.
That is so neat. You're truly one of the only people on this entire thing. I've done 60 plus episodes of this who are like, oh, I spent a lot of time, engaging with
It's a growth hack.
It is. Although I have to say, you being in the position of sports is quite different than I write about cryptocurrency.
That's very true. But I'll just say, regardless of what you write about, if you can, and not everybody can, but if you can reply to somebody super quickly and obviously, provide some value, like not just to get it out there, but, a valuable response. But like, those readers turn into loyalists.
Oh my gosh, right?
On one hand, they appreciate it. On the other hand, they now feel like they know you.
Their God has spoken to them. Absolutely.
And your name pops up in their email from that day on. They're like, this is my friend. My friend is messaging me. And so it doesn't require that much effort. And like I said, it's kind of fun from my perspective. There's some work involved for sure. But I just think it's so cool that I am able to kind of connect with people I otherwise never would be able to. And it's just kind of good stuff.
I once had, and I won't say the name or anything, but the chief editor at the Wall Street Journal respond to me after I was like, hey, great job on like doing this thing or whatever. And I almost like hit the floor. I'm like, what? And it was an engaging note back. It wasn't like, thanks. It was like a whole thing. Oh yeah, this is what we do with this. I was like floored. And now every time I read the Wall Street Journal, which I read front to back every single day, it's just my business, I think of that.
Well, I'd say, to give a comparison, responding to emails, I think is the same rule as newsletters. They both have, but there's so many people who don't respond to emails that when somebody does, it's magical.
Oh, it's actually magical.
There's so many bad newsletters that when there's a good newsletter, it's like magical. So when you can do something well that most people don't do well, it has a exponential effect. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, thank you for sharing that. So interesting. For your newsletter, by the way, and there's many newsletters that now exist for journalists. Are you seeking pitches for that?
I don't seek pitches. I get lots of pitches.
I'm sure you do, yes.
But no, you won't really seek any out. No.
Yeah, I got you. For most newsletters, I would find that that's not the case. Okay, so for things that you are writing more in the long form, Kendall, so you just did an article, for example, on the Tokyo Olympics. You've done something about the NCAA model unraveling. You're talking all this stuff. I mean, it is quite expansive, the array of sports that you cover. Do you have a way in which you come up with the inspiration for these stories? Or are you typically reacting to the news that's happening?
So it's a great question. I think, my job is very much a balance of those two things. And it's something I'm very aware of, balancing those two things. I think it's easy to fall into a trap of being too responsive. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I don't necessarily want to have a newsletter that's basically every morning like, here's what happened yesterday, and always kind of looking back or always kind of just regurgitating information. I also want to be looking forward. I also want to be connecting dots. I also want to be zooming out, all these kind of verbs you can use to kind of bring a new perspective to the story. So a lot of times something that maybe I'm about to put into like a roundup is like, this happened yesterday. I stop and realize, wait a second, that happened. Also, I remember from 2 weeks ago, this happened. Those are kind of related. How are they related? Now all of a sudden you have a more evergreen, bigger picture story that, you maybe would have missed and would have just kind of shared a news nugget. Now all of a sudden you have what we would call a one big thing, kind of this, deeper look. And so it really is a balance of the two. And it's kind of an art of figuring out, do we save this for something bigger or do we just kind of report that this happened?
Do you ever have though times you're doing your walk, you're doing whatever you're doing and you're like, oh, damn, I should do a story on that?
Oh, of course, constantly. The cool thing about sports, and I'm sure, there's plenty of journalists out there who are super involved with what they're reporting too, but I think there's something about sports where when I'm off, I'm watching sports. On the weekends, I'm watching sports.
You are in it for life.
I'm with my friends, I'm talking sports. So the amount of inspiration is just kind of constant. And also there's this,
it's your life. Yeah. That's cool.
Social media, like sports Twitter, for example, is just a gold mine of content. And, if you follow the right people, you have the right feed there, you kind of scroll through and, a meme or like a random tweet will just kind of send you off into a rabbit hole. And then you end up with the story idea. There's just so much content being created around sports every day.
Does that blow your mind? I mean, how big the world of sports are, like in any way, shape, or form? Are you just like, wow?
Oh yeah. Well, and that it's in many ways it's a blessing for me because we, as you said, is very expansive. We cover literally everything. I mean, most people who cover sports are covering a league or a sport, maybe a couple leagues. I cover everything. Even we have a section in the newsletter called the Ocho, which is specifically for really weird sports. We intentionally get as far out there as we can. And it's great because I've been doing this newsletter for years, and there has not been a single day where it was like, we don't have enough. And it's always, we have too much. And that's such a better place to be when you have too much and you get to cut versus like, it's the 11th hour and we do not have a top story. This is not good. It's always the opposite. And so that I'm just thankful for, that there is so much happening in sports all the time. And, one thing I note is my newsletter covers sports and sports business, which opens up sports business.
Oh, that's a whole other thing.
Opens up a whole nother. So just the amount of things I'm choosing from each day to write about is kind of endless, and I love it.
It's freaking cool. I have to say, just because I'm not so much a sports person, but I respect it. Like you kind of think, oh, that's kind of silly, or like fashion, that's silly. That's no. When you kind of like really study what, let's say, fashion is about, or home decor is about, or sports or things, it's tied to so many levels of just the human condition. In this case of sports, competing and teamwork and what you learn. And I mean, my mom made me do a sport in high school, both me and my sister, whether I wanted to or not, which I loved, but just as a testament to, you get a lot out of sports on like how to function as a human. So that's just what I take away from that.
Sports is, and again, I think this is true for many things, but sports in particular, I'd say, is one of those kind of verticals, whatever you want to call it, that touches a lot of other things. So, I end up doing a lot of stories with our media reporter, Sarah Fisher, because many of the most interesting stories in media, whether it's streaming, all these things, like sports is at the forefront of that because, in many ways, linear TV is still alive because of live sports. Technology is often at the forefront. Is social issues. I mean, sports really does touch everything. In many ways, sports is kind of just a part of our
kind of the beacon. Yeah.
It just kind of touches everything, particularly now that athletes themselves are, in many cases, the most famous celebrities on the planet. And so,
yeah, it's global. It's universal. Obviously, we have the Olympics. We know what about that. But there's no like, oh, well, in America, they do this thing called sports. Like, no.
European soccer championships are on right now, and it's just like so cool to see
biggest, yeah.
Countries playing other countries, Americans watch. I mean, it's soccer in particular.
I love it.
Today's interview will continue after this brief message brought to you by OnePitch. Are you curious to see the unique ways OnePitch helps PR professionals and marketers pitch journalists? Head to onepitch.co to learn about our new One Pitch score and see how easy it is to find the right journalist to pitch your news to. Sign up for your free account today. Now, back to today's episode.
Well, Kendall, I have a fill in the blank section here, so let's talk about that. I will give you the phrase and you could fill it in. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Great. My favorite sources always.
Do you mean publication sources or people?
More like publicists. Or maybe you have readers who are filling you in with good, juicy stuff. I don't know.
I would say my favorite sources always have a personal note somewhere in there. When they're contacting me, there's some type of not strictly business.
Oh, so you like that, like in pitches?
I like it when it's not forced. And it's, yeah, because that's obviously very easy to tell. I mean, you can just tell when somebody, either on one hand set this to clearly 20 people, or you can just tell. I just think anytime there's I can just tell when somebody's being very real with me and there's a level of human respect there.
Mm-hmm. The most annoying sources always.
Follow up too many times.
How many is too many?
4.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah. Oh, I've heard horrendous stories here. You'll get a response from me if
effectively explain to me why this benefits me or helps me.
Mm-hmm. You can follow up with me if
I tell you can't.
Yeah, definitely. The best compliment I ever received about my work was,
again, sports being as magical as it is, plenty of stories from readers, the value that this newsletter brings to their lives. But I think the coolest are when I hear from parents saying that this newsletter has helped them connect with their kids. It's usually moms with their sons or dads with their sons.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's cool. It's really, really cool.
That is magical. Oh, my favorite stories to write about are obviously sports, but like what?
I'd say either human interest stories, which sports just produces tons of, or sports media. I'm really just personally really interested in the future of watching sports.
Okay, so how is it shown? How does the consumer get the sports
to watch? Streaming.
Yeah.
How betting is integrated. I mean, there's just, sports leagues from a financial perspective revolve around the live game.
Yep.
And how people consume those games is changing rapidly, and so is the business around it. So it's just really interesting.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think people should know more about me is...
This is my second newsletter stint.
Your second? What was the first? From Bleacher Report?
No, so when I got out of sports media and stayed in media to learn how to actually start a media business, I ended up writing about tech and kind of entrepreneurship for a company called The Hustle, which was a blog.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up starting the daily newsletter there, which then became the whole business. And it's one of the biggest ones now. But most people think of me as a sports journalist and specifically a sport journalist with a newsletter. But my first newsletter experience was actually writing about startups.
There you go. So you've been in newsletters for a while. The last best thing I ate or cooked was?
Last best thing I ate was Indian food last night.
Ooh, was it good?
Great.
Oh, I love some good Indian food. Quarantine has taught me.
Quarantine has taught me how much I took socializing with friends for granted.
Oh, yeah. My perfect Sunday is?
NFL Red Zone in the fall.
Oh, nice. You knew the answer to that.
Yeah, do you know what NFL Red Zone is?
I believe it's like the front row seat to be able to watch a game.
No, it's a network that is 8 straight hours of commercial free every Sunday. There's
oh my God.
14.
No, I definitely did not know this.
12 to 14 NFL games on for a 6-hour span. And this is all of those games with no commercials. And so it's basically going between games, just trying to show you the most important plays. So it's just literally football for 8 hours with no breaks. If you're into football, it's like a dream. Yeah.
Wow, you are so in your element with this career. It is amazing.
People, have a fantasy team, right? So you're watching it's one of those things where I say to myself, how are there people out there who don't enjoy this?
You are in it. You are in it for life. You cannot never write about sports.
I kind of agree with you.
Yeah, that's freaking cool. That is just great. Okay, that concludes our little fill in the blank part. Now, I'm super curious about what you're going to say about this. So I always like to ask, what are you reading, watching, consuming, listening? I mean, we will take anything because, we're now just getting out of this pandemic type thing. So what would you say?
Well, I will say, and this is not usually the case, or at least not recently, because I've been kind of slacking in my Netflix consumption, only because I just started watching it this weekend and I was kind of blown away by how much I enjoyed it. I don't remember the title now, but it's a new docuseries on Netflix about basically like the history of pop music.
Mm-hmm. I love a good documentary.
Yeah, it's like a 6-part.
Okay, it's called This Is Pop.
This Is Pop. That's it. Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Wow. Uncover the real stories behind your favorite pop songs as this docuseries charts the impact of the festival scene, auto-tune, boy bands, and more. Seriously, this was great?
It was great. Like I was
really
pretty low expectations, and it just kind of blew me away. Maybe because I just didn't know a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, you can't get much more nostalgic than playing some Backstreet Boys or Britney Spears for me. Somebody
God, I know.
Born in 1991. I mean, that just...
Are you an elder millennial, by the way?
I'm not quite an elder millennial, but I'm like I'm probably right in the middle.
You're a hardcore millennial. Yeah. You think 1997 was 10 years ago,
yeah.
Right?
Yes. Like the 2000s didn't happen. I don't know.
I think of the 90s. I'm like, oh yeah, 10 years ago. I'm like, oh shit. Oh man. Anything else? That's a good tip. I'm going to actually put that down.
I have been slacking, but I've watched a few. I mean, I'm usually really up to date on... I watch any good documentary I can get my hands on. I'm trying to remember the last really...
Did you watch The Octopus
Yes.
Teacher? God.
I really enjoyed that, but
it's weird.
I also so my reaction to that was really cool. And then all positive things. And then the next day I just remember waking up and be like, that was weird.
It's weird.
Yeah, the guy was just a little...
There's a whole other story going on in there that was not disclosed, in my opinion.
There were a few moments in there where I was like getting a little emotional. I was like, wow.
I know about the freaking octopus.
Yeah, connecting with, but yeah.
I know. Oh, God.
If somebody said, should I watch this? I say, absolutely.
Yeah. Did you ever watch, okay, if you want a tearjerker, did you ever watch Crip Camp?
I did. Yes.
Oh, God.
Yep. Great movie.
I saw that at Sundance. Amazing. Yes. Okay.
Did you watch The Last Dance?
No. Oh gosh. The Last Dance. Okay.
It's
okay.
Docuseries. It came out last month.
Yeah, Netflix. Okay.
About Michael Jordan.
Oh, I remember seeing this and I was like, I don't need to watch something about Michael Jordan. Is it fantastic?
I mean, it's as good as it gets.
We
did a top 50 sports documentaries list, and I think we had this at number 4.
Oh, wow. What was number 1?
Hoop Dreams.
Hoop Dreams.
My favorite movie of all time.
Wow. Okay. I'm writing. Okay. Hoop Dreams. Okay. This is why I love this podcast, because I get all my...
Hoop Dreams is so great. It's essentially the elevator pitch, or the synopsis is, it's a documentary. It basically tells a story of 2 inner city kids who are extremely good at basketball. It's like, it's documenting their lives, and they just end up going in completely different paths. And it's just really interesting to see kind of how their lives take shape and how they're kind of impacted by things. It's a really good movie.
Putting it on the list. I love it. Kendall, what do you think is the future of journalism?
I think the future of journalism is, if I could put it into one word, community.
Have not heard that. Please expand.
I think that it's one future of journalism. I don't think, journalism as a whole should be entirely focused on community, but I just think what we're seeing, even with things like newsletters, is you're having this kind of, there's almost this split where a lot of legacy publishers are the ones breaking news and are the ones where people are doing, what I'd call quote unquote reporting, which is breaking news, which is reporting new information, bringing new information to light. And then you have this entire other swath, which is made up of a lot of younger digital media companies that haven't broken a story ever, but their whole focus is, well, we take the news and we deliver it to our audience because we know what our audience likes. And by the way, we also have a Facebook group that they're all in, or we also have a newsletter and they respond. And there's just a lot of younger digital media companies and just independent writers that are more focused on creating content for their readers and kind of treating it like a community.
Do you think that that's specific to sports?
No, absolutely not.
Interesting.
I think you're seeing it. I mean, some of them are, I'll keep using newsletters as an example. Some of them were, I mentioned The Hustle, which I used to write. The whole model there is basically get the biggest tech startup kind of entrepreneur news of the day, regurgitate that in a way that they know that their readers will consume and enjoy. And it's very communal. Same thing with Morning Brew is another newsletter.
Absolutely.
If the New York Times and these other publications weren't creating news, these publications wouldn't have anything to write about. Their job is to take that news and package it for their community. It's an interesting thing to watch as there's so much news out there. It's just becoming more and more about how do you leverage it and how do you deliver it to your readers.
And then how do you make them feel really special when you respond? Yeah, for sure. Okay, we've come, Kendall, to the part of the Mad Lib, which is super fun. And I'm going to give you the proxy, and then we're going to fill in the word, and then I will read you back the whole little paragraph, and we'll see if it's super accurate, maybe not accurate. It could be just fun. We'll kind of see. It's always a surprise. I'll tell you that. Let's do it. First word, emotion. Any emotion.
Sad.
What's an adjective?
Bright.
Bright. Another adjective.
Dry.
D-R-Y. Dry. Okay. What is a greeting? Any greeting?
Howdy.
I love that one. A verb.
Exercise.
Exercise. A noun.
Football.
Football. An adjective.
Smart.
A cringeworthy PR term or phrase, like just following up for the 15th time.
Per my last email, or per my something. Per. Any use of per.
Let me clarify that. Any use of per. Okay.
If we need one, per my last email, I think is.
Ooh, that's the scorcher for sure. Okay. Part of a pitch.
What's that?
What's a part of a pitch? Like subject line or closing or?
Yeah, subject line.
All right, we'll go with that. Length of time.
Year.
A person, ideally alive.
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady. I know that one. And then lastly, an emotion.
Shocked.
Great. Okay, Kendall, here we go. When I think of the future of journalism, I feel sad. The pitches I receive have gone from bright to dry. If I receive a pitch that starts with howdy, I exercise. When I write stories on football, I get smart. My favorite pitches include any use of per my last email and very specific subject lines. I normally take around a year to respond to my emails, but if it's Tom Brady, I will respond immediately. If you do get a response back from me, you should know that I'm very shocked for you. I love it.
There's some truth in there.
There is. You know what?
Absolutely. I will absolutely respond to Tom Brady.
See? Exactly. And if you'd be shocked at the response, hey, that's also true. They always have some evidence of accuracy. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I am a little bit sad about journalism, so we won't get into that. But yeah, there you go.
There you go. Kendall, this has been absolutely a delight. You have been fun. I am so happy you are living, breathing, and existing in the entire world of sports, day in and day out. What a dream. And I think that's really rad.
Appreciate it. Yeah, this is great. Very fun. I have never experienced the Mad Libs. That if I ever do a podcast, this seems like I might have to borrow this because it's a great.
Perfect. Thank you. See, what a compliment to me. I love it. But also you because you're fun. And this was a lot of fun. And it goes both ways.
Yeah, well, thank you again.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist featuring Kendall Baker from Axios. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review to share your thoughts about the show and today's guest. To learn more about the latest tools on OnePitch and to subscribe to our weekly podcast newsletter, head to our website at onepitch.co. We'll see you all next week with a brand new guest and even more insights about the journalists you want to learn more about. Until then, start great stories.